So international students from Germany have a historic opportunity, James, to study in the United States. When I heard this first, I thought there's no historic opportunity. Things are going a little crazy, and I feel that a lot of German families, mom, dad, son, and daughter, are hesitant to go to the United States to study because they don't see any opportunity. Now, I listened to you after I heard that you have a PhD in educational psychology. Maybe you can help me and the audience understand what's going on in the United States, what has changed, what hasn't changed, and where is there an opportunity to you?
Sure. So start by restating that the campus experience in terms of being a welcoming and supportive environment for our international students, that is the same as it ever was, business as usual. In terms of the opportunity being historic, is fundamental economics, supply and demand, right? So as the United States reputation, our brand, gets damaged a bit, what that does is it depresses student interest around the world. But as I said, the United States universities remain as dedicated as ever. So in order to combat the decline in demand, they're increasing things like scholarship opportunities. And admissions opportunities become more easily accessible for students.
So this means with any given academic profile, somebody may be watching this, their chances of going into a better ranked university than they could have, let's say in 2022, is something that people have to understand, and that this is a window of opportunity that may also close.
That's right.
If the political landscape changes.
Well, and it will,
Yeah, right.
in fact. So we don't have to get into the United States political system, but the door will swing the other way.
I see.
There's no doubt about it. So when you use the word historic, that's not overstating it. It is true that right now is as good a time for students ever to not just get admitted, but to potentially get scholarship opportunity and funding opportunities.
So to help really see through this clearly, it seems to me at least that European families are meshing two topics that don't have to do with each other. One is what's happening in the American higher educational sector. It's as good as it's ever been. And the other one are changes on the political side. That these changes, I guess maybe you can talk about this. They seem as if US higher education is not as inviting anymore towards international students. But that's not true.
No, that's not true at all. In fact, it's quite the opposite. American universities, as I said, are rallying around our international student communities to create opportunities that didn't exist. And so, I can understand why people watching the 24-hour news cycle are going to conflate these. They're going to compare these things and think they're the same, but they're not. So in a kind of confusing and chaotic political environment has nothing to do with what's happening on our university campus. As I said previously, it's business as usual.
So James, when you hear the media narrative, or if you don't hear it, let me tell you, in Europe there's a lot of noise when it comes to, I guess, the perceived uncertainty in the US. How prevalent is that actually true on any US campus? If you have any examples maybe that you can share.
Sure. I would say in the context of the question, it is important to remember that the point of a university, not just in the United States, but universities, really good universities here in Europe, is to inspire passions, to inspire conversation, to inspire talented young men and young women to voice their opinion. So it's not at all unusual to see protests at college universities worldwide. Related to what I said about the amount of attention the United States gets broadly, but also university campuses specifically, when you're seeing, let's say, a protest on a campus, that's a normal thing. But if you're seeing it reported in the news constantly, over and over and over, it can create the illusion of chaos. It's not chaos. That is how a healthy university is intended to function. So for the lived experience of the student at the American university, it is business as usual. Your classes are there, your friends are there. These campuses have security forces whose job it is to make sure that people can be spirited in conversation, but always remain safe. And that is how it was, how it is and how it will be for students studying at American campuses.
Cool. So I have a follow-up question on the previous topic as it relates to the student experience on campus. So what are standard safety measures that American universities have always had and probably always will have that European families just don't know exist?
Yeah, so universities exist in communities, right? Every community, every town, every city in the United States, of course, has a traditional police force, like most places in the world. But what a family here in Germany might not realize is that the universities themselves also have security or safety professionals. They can, in fact, be licensed police officers themselves. Are often it's a robust group that handles anything from traditional, let's say, a roommate dispute to if there's a fire on campus. We have a campus safety team that will begin ensuring that the students and the residents are safe, and then the town or a local city police will show up, and the fire department. So there are levels to it. And as I just to reiterate, what people might not realize is that these universities themselves also have a professional staff dedicated to ensuring the safety of the residents.
So would you even say, just to get like a comparison into our viewers' minds, is that an American university campus often represents a micro city in a bigger city, whereas in Europe that's not the case. The university is an institution in a city just like a supermarket, right? But it doesn't have its own ecosystem of.
That's exactly right. I couldn't have said it better myself. So yes, what students can look forward to when they join an American university is that quite often, especially another thing people don't realize is that there can be American universities that have 60,000 students. So to describe it as a city within a city is quite right. And so that city within a city has its own safety force.
So when international students get to the US, all that may be new to them. What other support mechanisms may there be? Obviously, it depends on the university, but just generally speaking, how do American universities try to cater to international students having a good experience, especially these days?
For sure. So every university in the United States, all of them, will have something called International Student Services Office or some form of that. The men and women that work in those offices, they're there to ensure that the international student is following regulatory guidance, just making sure that the student is doing what's expected of them as a student in the United States. But then there are other universities like the ones we work with where we have an additional layer of support. So you'll still have your International Student Services Office, but then you'll have a layer of support, men and women whose job it is to ensure that you're positioned to succeed as an international student on this campus. We want you to understand simple things like where's the health services office, where's the cafeteria, but also make sure you acclimate to the campus community and feel like a real member of the campus. Research shows that if you can ensure a student feels welcomed in a community, they're far more likelier to actually succeed as a student. And so that's important to us.
So I have a follow-up question to that. So when we speak to German families these days, whether that's mom, dad, or son and daughter, and they heard you talk about all this, I think they believe you in that in the microcosmos of any university, you are welcome. There is this support structure. But then the question comes, well, can I even get there? Meaning, will the United States allow me in? There is a lot of concerns, maybe due to wrong information about visa regulatory changes that started, I think, in 2025. Maybe you can ease that up or shed some light on what the actual situation is for international students.
So I have good news.
Okay.
If we're speaking to a German audience here, which I think we are, and Europe really broadly, the kinds of roadblocks that might exist for people from other parts of the world, they don't exist. They don't exist here. So we're seeing very high visa success rates. We're talking between 90 and 100% visa success rate for students from Europe interested in studying in the United States. So whether you're doing a J1, that's like an exchange program, or an F1 visa, which is your traditional student visa, the concerns that maybe other parts of the world, you don't need to have those here.
So in summary, what you're saying, if an American university is welcoming international students, it has this support structure it permeates over the Atlantic Ocean without roadblocks. There is nothing that would hold you back that cannot be overcome other than perceived obstacles. But you're saying it is just perception.
Yeah.
There is no visa interview that could hold you back when you approach it with the same mind and you have genuine intentions to study in the US. Nothing has changed.
That's right.
In the last years.
That's right. I think it's important. As if you're considering coming to the United States, as you just said, I'll just plant a flag where you said genuine intentions.
Yeah.
That matters. That does matter, because you will be in front of a visa official and you'll have to answer the question, why do you want to study in the United States? And they're trained professionals.
Right.
They want to hear from someone who has a real interest in coming and studying and learning maybe a little bit about your career outcomes or career goals rather.
Yeah.
And if you're serious about studying, you won't have any issues.
Well, but I think this is so refreshing to hear for me and for families looking to study in the US or not, because what you just said is common sense. A visa immigration officer will ask you, has always asked international students, even in the last 10, 20, 30 years, why do you want to go? It's still the same. The only thing that has changed, and that's so interesting, is the perception is that it's become way more difficult, if not impossible, but you're welcoming international students on a daily, weekly basis. And that's so refreshing to hear. Thanks for elaborating that.
Yeah, no, it's true. We mentioned earlier, I do think the timing now is really good. It's important to remember, if you're an ambitious young person who's serious about your education, despite all of the noise, American universities are still engines of innovation. They still are. You're going to get a world-class education at an American university, and the experience you have is going to be as good as it ever was, but now you're doing it at a time maybe where the demand isn't as high, so I do think there's even more opportunity out there.
So you just spoke about how much innovation comes out of American university. Now there are reasons for this, but let's say this. We have a German family that looks at the perceived risk and they get scared and then they choose not to send their kid to the United States. What upsides may they overlook?
Yeah. So when you're coming to the United States, you're joining an American university, especially as an international student. If you're looking at that peer set, these are people that by definition are entrepreneurs, right? They're prepared to engage in the world and make the most of it. And so now what you're doing is you're putting yourself amongst people who are more likely than less to succeed in life, in professional settings, in the business world, in whatever your chosen industry is. So by the time you finish your degree, 4 years later, or if it's a master's degree, 2 years later, you've now expanded your personal network. And sometimes, as the saying goes, right, it's not what you know, it's who you know. So having that network can be valuable.
I have a question there. This is my personal experience, but it may be super subjective. So I want to maybe you can help me flatten it out a little bit. So I think for you as Americans having grown up in the US, it is easier to study at an American university. It's the natural way, right? And you have the average college student, some more ambitious than others. I always felt like, as an international student myself, the international student crowd, like everybody, and I'm talking 100%, wanted to achieve something. Nobody made it there on accident. Like, it's not like you wake up, oof, I have a visa, I'm suddenly in another country. So it's this, and we have it everywhere, the spirit of going the extra mile seems to be super prevalent amongst international students. Is this, I think, a general rule that you would say is true, or would you have a more nuanced view on it?
No, I think the experience that you had is exactly right. Growing up in the United States on the East Coast, going to college, for me, going to university didn't require a great deal of thought or stress. It was just the natural progression. So there wasn't the motivation to succeed in a way that I see among our international students. It is not uncommon at all for our students to arrive and that be their very first time in the United States. I ask myself, if I was going back, a few years, if I could, do I have that? Did I have that motivation, that drive to take such a risk? And I don't know, is my answer. But when I see it among our international students, it's no surprise at all to me to then see them succeed, to enter into the honors programs. And you have to be a really hardworking student to get in there. We have something at one of our universities called the Jagger Fellowship. It's an internship opportunity. You have to be an elite student. It does not surprise me at all that many of those fellowships go to our international student community because they have demonstrated just by getting off that plane that they're prepared to achieve goals that they've set for themselves. Yeah.
And I guess then let me talk directly to the camera. I guess what is important then, if you feel like you have this spirit of wanting to go the extra mile within yourself, then the United States may be more for you versus if you just want to relax throughout your secondary education, maybe Europe is the place for you. I think it's good to make that differentiation that the United States can be more demanding. Obviously, it depends on the university too, but you have smaller classes. Maybe we can talk about that too, that hiding isn't an option. And that can be bad if you're lazy, but if you're ambitious and you want to get yourself out there and intellectually rub yourself against the professors, maybe that's an environment that is specifically interesting for those ambitious ones, right?
Yeah, that's an important point, and it's going to require the student to reflect and think about the kind of environment that they need to succeed. Yeah. As I said earlier, there are universities in the United States that can have 60,000 students. And some of those classes then can be rather large, auditorium style classes where you might have 100, maybe even 200 other students. Are you the type of person that can succeed in that environment? Speaking from experience, I was not. Yeah. Like you mentioned a moment ago, I really did need to have smaller class sizes. One, so I was held accountable, right? Yeah. The professors knew my name, so I felt an obligation to do well. And then the other piece of it was being able to have that direct access with the faculty member because some of the classes can be quite hard. I needed to have that additional support and develop that mentor-mentee relationship. That was important for me. But maybe it's not for you. So think about it. Reflect on the environment you think you could succeed in.
So one thing that I found subjectively speaking, and I wonder whether this is true when you work with so many universities and so many different students, is that students in Germany often think that a university is there for one thing and one thing only, and that is left brain academic education. I think you hinted towards the fact that it can be much more. Maybe you can broaden our viewers' perception of what you could all miss out on when you don't decide to go to the United States, and why that is.
So it's true that a university is designed as an academic institution. You're there to learn. You're there to accumulate knowledge and maybe even produce knowledge of your own if you're going into a PhD program. But it is and ought to be so much more than that. For the students that come to American universities, when I am fortunate to speak to them at an orientation, I often pose a challenge to them. I say, put yourself in an uncomfortable situation at least once a day. Extend your hand and introduce yourself to someone you didn't know. Go to a restaurant to try food that you've never tried before. Join a social club that you feel uncomfortable if you're speaking publicly. Do all of these things because you're going to grow as a person. And if you need a practical reason to do it, you're also going to continue to grow your network.
Yeah, true. And you find out whether you like something or not, right? You might as well get yourself into a position. I think that's so funny when you're like, okay, James told me this adversity thing, get yourself out there and uncomfortable. What if you find yourself in a very comfortable sweet spot that you're like, wow, I never knew I was good at this.
That's it. I mean, that's the goal, right? Is to try and teach yourself more about yourself. Maybe you've found that, I really enjoy chess club, or even my own personal experience. I ended up taking an elective as an undergraduate that introduced me to philosophy.
What's an elective for?
Oh,
for
sorry. So the way it works typically is you join an American university and you declare a major, right? So let's say, for instance, Jonas, you joined one of our schools and you declared that you wanted to be a business major focusing in accounting. Very exciting, right? But like every student at an American university, you have a group of courses that we call electives, meaning you get to elect the class you want to take. Maybe you want to try an astronomy course. Maybe you want to try a painting course. So when I began as an undergraduate studying for a bachelor's degree, I joined the university convinced, for reasons I'm not exactly sure, that I wanted to go on and study law. So normally you'll take a major like political science. So that's what I was. I was a political science major with the expectation that I would then go on to take what's called the law school acceptance test, and I'd go on to law school, and that was that. But during the elective process, meaning where I got to kind of sample different things, I took a philosophy course. And I found that that was far more intellectually satisfying to me than I ever could imagine studying political science or law. So I immediately ran to my advisor's office, my academic advisor, and I explained this feeling I was having to her, and she said, you know what, you should really consider changing your major. Why don't we get that started? And I had her support, and that's what we did. And I haven't regretted it since. And the funny irony here, as an aside, is that it turns out philosophy majors, broadly speaking, score much higher on the law school acceptance test than political science majors. I didn't go into law, but I would have felt confident had I done that.
If I understand you correctly, you have your major, your core academic focus, and then you have a, let's say, can I put it this way, a random intellectual curiosity that you felt like something inside of me, my soul, whatever, like an innate interest just wants me to try that. And American universities acknowledge this is what you're here for, give it a go.
That's right. So the idea there is we could talk about the history of the university system going back to actually the University of Bologna in Italy, but the point was to educate you not as a specific major. We're not going to educate you as an accountant. We're going to educate you as a human being. So we're going to give you these liberal arts courses that really help you establish full-fledged humanness of sorts. And that's the whole point of a liberal arts university.
I think that liberal arts education is something that we often don't have in Europe, which, by the way, and I was crazy when I found this out, the average dropout rate at German universities is currently around 40%. Same for Austria. The reason is that the undergraduate here takes 3 years. You're forced to take a decision after high school into a subject that you may never have. Just talk about medicine, law, business, psychology, architecture. None of it is taught in high school. And in the US, I guess the undergrad education is 4 years, and you have this academic flexibility right in the beginning.
That's right. It gives you the opportunity to learn a little bit more about yourself, learn a little bit more about the discipline that you've chosen. Many universities even have something called undecided. So you can come into the university and declare yourself undecided.
And I think that is just that this is an official way to enter university can be so refreshing. I think it was new to me when I heard this the first time, because sure, you have to acknowledge it. Hey, I just don't know. But being okay with it and entering a system that is also okay with it and appreciates that you don't know yet, because how could you, is so refreshing for some students. This is my personal take here. Feel free to add on it. If you don't know what you want to study at, which is one of the biggest decisions we'll ever make, the United States may be a reason just for that. It's not like I have so many students that speak to us who wait. Oh, I don't know what to study yet. Let me figure that out before I commit to studying in the United States. You say the opposite is true.
That's right. Typically, you really don't start getting into your core majors, subject major courses until maybe even your second year, inching into your third year. So there's a way for you to join the university in the United States, and your first year you could focus on all those elective courses and you could sample. Maybe you've got an interest in business education, but you've got a passion for film. Well, guess what? Now you can take both to see, in fact, where should you go? How are you feeling about this? And then maybe you could take, a music class along the way, and suddenly you've decided you want to become a music historian, a musicologist, or something along those lines. So yes, it gives you an onboarding process that allows you to explore.
And in summary, it takes off unnecessary pressure to decide for something that you may feel a little bit unsure of. You're like, hey, you're not forced into a rush decision without having yourself tested out.
That's right.
Cool. Yeah. So many families who come to us these days are very specific about ranking. And they say, well, the reason why I consider the US is because if I look at the global top 20, 17 of them, I don't know exactly, but a vast majority is in the US. Yes. But some of them are you have Oxford and Cambridge in the UK, and then there are excellent universities in Singapore, Australia, Canada, etc. So if somebody considers the US just for ranking, is there anything else that you would throw into the bucket?
Sure. And you're right. There are excellent universities around the world. It does happen that the majority of them are located in the United States. So in terms of thinking, well then, what are the other advantages the United States provides versus maybe some of these other countries? And that is just opportunity. It still remains, I said earlier, an engine of innovation, a resource-rich environment. So you've got all of the major companies are headquartered out of the United States. Right. So if you're looking for, here's the language we use all the time now, return on investment. Right. What is that ROI? You're going to be spending a lot of money for your education. Let's ensure that you're going to be able to put that to use. And I still think the United States is a place where you're going to have far more opportunity than anywhere else.
So what I think, and again, this is something that you may know more of, is that these top institutions, these research institutions who produce new knowledge, they don't just teach, it has a ripple effect on universities that are, I guess, even in the geographic surroundings, but even if a university is not close to Harvard, Stanford, MIT, or these big names, what is the effect that you think the general ecosystem in the United States gets out of just being nestled in the same country?
Yeah.
How is the interworking there?
So often the titans of industry, right? The men and women. I work with a university I live, as I said earlier, in New York City, work with a university in New York City. The faculty that teach in that university are often the men and women who are the leaders in the subject that they're teaching. So you have Fortune 500 managing directors teaching in our business schools. You have the producers and directors on Broadway teaching in the performing arts program. So the broadly speaking, titans of industry, as I said, are all still rooted in the United States and based in the United States. And the universities draw that talent in to teach the students. And I'll say one other thing about ranking, because it is important, right? I understand why it's important, and I understand why there's a focus on that worldwide, not just here in Germany, but in the United States and elsewhere. And if you can get into these elite institutions, congratulations, and I encourage you to go. But also think about, is that going to be the right place for you? Had I been admitted into Harvard and gone there, I don't know that I would have succeeded, to be honest with you. I think putting yourself in a position to succeed is as important than anything else. So make sure the university is the right fit. There are really wonderful communities where you'll get an excellent education. You'll be able to take full advantage of the alumni population, but not put that unrelenting pressure that an MIT or a Harvard or one of those places can do to students.
So to paraphrase, in other words, you say growth happens when you're challenged in an environment that doesn't underwhelm you, neither overwhelm you, right? Because you're going to be teared apart and go into depression, all sort of things, when you are just put into an environment that is just not fitting because it's too competitive.
Yep.
So it's the opposite also true, right?
That's right. And the term we use in learning theory is zone of proximal development.
I see.
Zone of proximal development. You're right. You're trying to find an institution that's not going to bore you, won't be too easy, but it's not going to be too challenging and too far outside your zone of proximal development. And that can be hard. And that's why I encourage you to, especially if you're a European audience, German audience, it's hard to visit a campus, I understand. But through the miracle of modern technology,
Sure.
you can do interviews with faculty members. You can research the campuses on YouTube. You can meet student groups. They're really, really happy to do those things because they want you to be a good fit. No one is trying to position students not to succeed. It's the exact opposite.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So James, for families who are watching this, who made it all the way through this video so far, and who are seriously considering for their child to have the best future, and who are considering the United States, but who are just not quite sure yet, what would you tell them to make the best decision?
So the anxiety you're feeling as a parent, we all get it. You certainly all feel it. Sending your son or daughter, putting them on a plane, watching them fly away, and hoping that they succeed, that can be a very tense and emotional situation. But just think long term about, as a parent, what we're trying to do is make sure that our sons and daughters have more opportunity than less. And despite all the noise we talked about earlier, the United States universities are still the best in the world, and the opportunities that these communities can present, especially to an international audience, right? As our world continues to flatten through technology, the ability to have, be multilingual, not very many Americans are, you're entering an environment where you have the qualifications to succeed already. So it's about making sure that our kids fare better than we do. That's the whole point. And I still think that the United States can present that for an international audience.
Thank you very much.
My
It was
pleasure.
a pleasure having you today.
My friend. Thank you very much.